When you study the real, on-the-ground improvisation of World War II, the kind used by factory crews, air raid wardens, frontline mechanics, and ordinary families, you discover that the era wasn't just defined by military strategy. It was defined by resourcefulness. People were forced to make do with what they had, and this pressure turned the war years into one of the greatest laboratories of necessity in modern history. Yet, among the thousands of clever solutions created during this time, one stands out for its quiet importance and near-complete disappearance from modern memory. It was a method for making regular cloth far more resistant to catching fire. Not industrial fabric, not military-grade material, not something locked behind patents or classified documents, just everyday cloth transformed through simple pre-plastic chemistry. What makes this method remarkable is not only how effective it was, but how widely it was used. Rolls of treated cloth hung in fire brigades. Workshop crews kept it ready next to machines. Household defense volunteers stored it near stoves and lamps. Frontline engineers wrapped tools and work aprons with it because it added almost no weight, no rigidity, and no bulk, yet offered real protection in environments where a single spark could threaten equipment, supplies, or lives. Understanding this method today is about more than the treatment itself. It's about the mindset behind it, the way wartime societies use knowledge rather than advanced materials to bridge the gap between vulnerability and safety. Fire was one of the most feared threats of the era, and civilians knew it firsthand. To grasp why this technique mattered, it helps to step into the world of the 1930s and 1940s. Entire neighborhoods in Europe and Asia faced the constant risk of incendiary bombing. A single device dropped on a rooftop could ignite wooden beams, textiles, and household fuel sources faster than most families could react. Factories working around the clock were crowded with cotton waste, oil residues, and chemical vapors. Workshops and depots held engines, fuels, and ammunition in tight proximity. On the battlefield, mechanics repaired vehicles under threat of sparks while surrounded by petrol. Engineers built improvised bridges, cut metal, or handled explosives in situations where any accident had consequences beyond personal injury. Without modern flame-resistant synthetics, people depended on mineral chemistry developed long before the war. Textile mills had long known how to alter the burn characteristics of natural fibers through laundry salts and finishing agents. Civil defense planners took these earlier ideas and pushed them further, looking for ways to make fabric that would resist ignition long enough to smother flames, protect equipment, or slow down fire spread inside confined spaces. The wartime formula relied on boron-based salts that changed how cloth behaved under heat. Natural fibers burn because heat breaks them down into flammable vapors. Interrupt that process and you change the entire outcome. Boron-based mineral salts, used at the time for laundry and cleaning, were discovered to alter this breakdown in a crucial way. Instead of producing the vapors that feed flames, treated fibers tended to char and stiffen, creating a protective layer that denied oxygen and slowed combustion. Civil defense records from Britain, the United States, and several Commonwealth countries describe this behavior in training manuals and workshops. Firewatch groups demonstrated how treated cloth could be laid over small flare-ups without immediately igniting. Factory safety officers used it to shield machinery exposed to sparks during emergency repairs. Families in high-risk areas sometimes treated cloth panels near hearths or cooking zones, a makeshift precaution against household accidents at a time when every resource counted. The important point is that the treatment didn't simply coat the fabric, it penetrated it. The salts settled into the weave, altering the way the fibres responded to heat rather than sitting on the surface like a paint or spray. The result was cloth that still felt and behaved like cloth. It folded normally. It draped normally. It stitched normally. It just burned very differently. Many preserved samples still resist flame today, proving the method's long-lasting impact. One of the most fascinating pieces of evidence comes from museum archives and civil defense storerooms, where original wartime textiles have been stored for decades. In controlled tests conducted by textile researchers, some of these samples still resist sustained flame exposure. They char, darken, and shrink, but refuse to support a steady flame. This endurance is not because the treatment was permanent. It was because the mineral salts bonded deeply into the fibre structure. Even after decades of storage, the chemical environment inside the cloth still encourages carbonization rather than ignition. From a scientific standpoint, this behavior has everything to do with how cellulose, the primary component of cotton and linen, breaks down under heat. Boron compounds encourage early carbonization, meaning the cloth forms a protective layer quickly enough to interrupt the ignition cycle. During the war, training films showed civil defense teams laying treated cloth over burning debris while sparks scattered across it. Instead of flaring up, the fabric blackened and hardened, creating the insulating barrier that saved countless structures from escalating fires. For a modern audience, especially younger viewers, the value in this knowledge isn't in attempting to recreate wartime mixtures at home. Fire-resistant fabrics today are professionally engineered and tested under strict safety standards. Handling chemical treatments or attempting to fireproof materials without proper training can introduce risks that weren't fully understood during the war. What matters is the logic behind the method, how wartime societies used available minerals, textile knowledge, and practical thinking to solve life-threatening challenges when high-tech solutions didn't exist. That mindset is what speaks directly to the survival community today. It shows that resilience doesn't depend on advanced gear. It depends on understanding materials, fire behavior, and the principles that make certain environments safer than others. If you study woodworking, metalworking, field repairs, or historical engineering, the lesson is clear. Knowledge, real, detailed knowledge, is the most valuable tool you can carry. Wartime improvisation shows that survival begins with understanding, not equipment. Modern survivalists can learn a great deal from how civilians and soldiers approach fire risk during World War II. They didn't wait for perfect gear. They educated themselves about what they had. They respected how fire behaves, how quickly it spreads, and how important it is to keep dedicated fire-smothering materials within arm's reach. They understood which fabrics were safe around heat and which ones were dangerous. They built layers of safety into their routines because the alternative wasn't inconvenience, it was catastrophe. This forgotten fabric treatment stands as a reminder that some of the most effective survival ideas weren't glamorous or technologically advanced. They were grounded in careful observation, chemistry that predates plastics, and a commitment to protecting life with whatever resources were available. It is the same mindset that today's preparedness community strives to preserve. If this deep look into wartime ingenuity gave you something meaningful to think about, make sure you subscribe to Survival Logic, share this video with fellow history enthusiasts, and help keep this kind of knowledge alive for the next generation of researchers, builders, and survival-minded viewers.